Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode. For those of you who didn't get the memo, Real Love Revolution season is coming upon us very soon. So I'm already creating content based on what you've asked me for. So I put it out there on the interweb and asked you to tell me what are your biggest love challenges, self-love, relationship love. And so this is what I will be talking about for the next few months. And for the women in the crew, if you haven't joined my free Facebook group of about 12,000 women, the Real Love Revolution Facebook group, please do, because Wednesday Wisdom is also coming back starting in December. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, I will be live for 30 minutes, just basically diving into everything that you want to know about so you can create healthy, vibrant, lasting, durable love in your life. Okay, moving on to today. Someone wrote in about dating and that there was a lot of confusion where she found herself ending up with bad guys. That she would date a guy, they seemed great, but after a few dates, she would realize that they were really crappy, but she was kind of sucked in by their charm and by what they said, but not necessarily what they did. So you know who you are, who wrote that in. This is for you. So I came up with what I think are 8 really solid warning signs when you're dating that if you see them, you should not ignore them. So let's start with a pet peeve of mine, shall we? And hey, you guys, this could be because I'm old school or I'm old, like I'm older than a lot of people in my audience. But this whole thing, number one, is someone who wants to be sexual too soon, like sexting before you've even met. Am I crazy, or is that just incorrect? Anybody? Can we agree that someone wanting you to send them a naked picture of yourself or starting to talk all sexual before you've met is effing weird? No? Anybody? I think it is. And if you don't think it is, then I'm going to say then there's probably some unresolved injury in your life where someone crossed a boundary in your young life, or you were sexualized very young, or praised for your beauty or your sexuality in a way that it became this very core part of your identity. Because it's very easy for people to confuse lust with love, but they are two incredibly different things. So that is warning sign number 1. If someone is sexting early on, I say no, because I don't think that's going to lead anywhere good. That's just me. All right, number 2 is about being someone who keeps their word. And people will reveal this to you early on in the dating situation, where they'll say, I'll call you Friday. Maybe we'll get together over the weekend. Then they don't call on Friday, and they text you on Monday being like, hey, how was your weekend? Right? That's someone who doesn't keep their word. And so much of the time I found with my clients or women in my Real Love Revolution course or Boundary Bootcamp course, there's all these lies that we tell ourselves not to deal with what's real. So I don't want to make a big deal. Maybe he got caught up. Maybe she got caught up, right? And this is to spare yourself from having a hard conversation. But my thought is perhaps we want to nip this type of behavior early on. Just nip it in the bud. Where if someone says, I'll call you on Friday, and they don't call you on Friday, when they text you on Monday, if that happens, or a scenario like that, say, you said you would get in touch with me on Friday. I was concerned. I hope you're okay. Or you can be sarcastic. I thought you got abducted by aliens. Because why else would you say you were going to call and not call? Because when you start in the beginning of a relationship, when you're dating, to let those things slide for fear that they're going to think you're a bitch or that you're demanding or that you're controlling, you really set yourself up for pain down the road later. Because I promise you, if someone does that on like the 4th interaction with you, that is definitely a way that they behave regularly. So the frustration of having someone not do what they say they're going to do, you can spot it early and either call it out. Perhaps it is an extreme circumstance. We don't know. But you have to ask. You have to say, you said you'd call on Friday. Or you can also be proactive and get in touch with them on Friday and say, hey, I thought you were going to call. Like pretending that you're more laid back than you are, pretending that you don't notice something that you do, is also a way of falsely presenting yourself. I was sharing this story the other day with someone about when I was dating, when I was single in New York. And my couple of friends gave me some advice. They said, maybe your regular personality, I was a talent agent at that point, is like a little too much for the dating world. So maybe you should tone it down a little. Okay. No. Maybe you should curse less. I was like, no. And maybe you should, lie about your age. And I was like, hi, no to all of those things, because they'll find out about your age if you lie about it. And why? Why am I acting like I'm ashamed of any of those things when I'm not? My right person will think that my personality is just fine. And even if I wasn't that secure about it then, I knew that misrepresenting myself was not for me. I'm not that good of a liar. Like I couldn't remember what I had or hadn't said. I don't think that that's the way to go. So when we don't call someone out on their bad behavior, that's also another form of misrepresenting ourselves, because you did notice that they didn't call. So why are we now going to dial into their false reality and act like, my weekend was okay, how was yours? Why? Nobody made that person say they'd call on Friday. That's another thing. It's like a free world, right? The third tip to look out for is someone who runs hot and cold, especially in the communication department. So it's different than not keeping your word, because this is specific behavior where they're really all into it when they're chasing and when they're wanting to get your attention. And then either it could be after you've had like a nice date that they disappear. They just ghost, even if it's just for a while. Or they go from texting you many times a day to not even responding to you texting them. To me, this is an indication of someone who desires intimacy, but then when it starts getting close, it makes them freak out, and so they need space. So you don't want to start a relationship with someone who off the bat we can already tell has intimacy issues. Like that inconsistency is speaking to a deeper kind of a problem, in my estimation. Okay, and the number 4 is very close to my heart because my mother was a waitress as I was growing up. Someone who is rude to people in the service industry. This tells you so much about who they are as a person. Someone who is condescending to someone or is very difficult. Because there will be a point that condescension and difficult behavior is aimed at you if you end up being in a long-term relationship with this person. So that's, to me, that was always a red flag when I was dating back in the day. Another thing to look for, number 5, is that they lack meaningful long-term relationships. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to have their friends from childhood like I do. I am saying if they have no long-term relationships and if they're not close with their family, and keep in mind, there are exceptions, right? Some people have really toxic families, so they're not in touch with them, but that wouldn't preclude them from having other long-term meaningful relationships unless there was a problem with, again, to me, this points to some kind of intimacy something. The 6th warning sign that I would like you to look out for is someone who is blaming others. That they're telling you about their life, but they're blaming their ex, they're blaming their boss, they're blaming others for, quote unquote, their lot in life. If that boss hadn't been this way, then they would have been way further ahead. Or, their ex took them for everything, that greedy bitch, blah, blah, blah. That tells you, A, that they don't take responsibility for their life, for their choices, for their 50% of every situation that they are in, because that is what they're responsible for. But especially keep your ears perked up for someone who talks really badly about their ex. There's nothing wrong with talking about your past relationships at some point in the beginning of dating. I think it's normal. I think not talking about that is weird. Some people are like, it's not appropriate. Well, it's not appropriate to spend an entire date talking about it, but someone's romantic history is actually a valuable thing to know, right? And you can talk about a past experience without blaming the other person. You can say, I was devastated, I was very hurt, I was really sad, I felt very betrayed, rather than blaming language is more like, well, they did and they did and they did. And again, this is something because, if you get into a relationship with someone like this, you will eventually be the focus of their blaming, right? If they don't take responsibility for their choices and for their life. You do not want that. Number 7 is someone who's a bad listener, a bad communicator. If you go out on a date with someone, I don't care how good looking they are, I don't care how much money they have, if they talk about themselves the entire time, don't ask you any meaningful questions about you, I don't love it. I don't love it because to me it indicates a self-centeredness, a selfishness, and perhaps, a narcissistic trait. We don't know. Now, sometimes people are nervous on the first date. So if there were other good qualities, but they just kind of talk too much about themselves, I'm not saying if you had a good time anyway, not to go on a second date, because sometimes it really is nerves. Some people are very nervous dating, fine. But it is an indication that is a personality trait. Like listening, athletic listening is a skill. Meaningful listening, someone being present with you, wanting to, what is dating? The beginning of dating is supposed to be learning about each other, which doesn't happen if only one person shares. Now, this could also be you, because you may be an expert listener. You may hide behind your listening. You may ask a lot of questions because you're nervous and really not give the other person a chance to ask you questions. So I want you to really think about that one, because it can look very simple, but there could be many more dynamics going on than what it looks like. But if you go out with someone a couple of times, you will know if they are a good, a mediocre, an excellent, or a terrible listener by what they also remember about your life. Someone may also ask you questions and not listen to the answer, and that would be evidenced in them not remembering anything that you say, right? Or not remembering the people. Listen, you don't have to remember everything. You got to remember the significant, important people. The person's closest friend, sister, the siblings, parents. I'm not saying you need to know all the players early on in a relationship, but, the important ones that person should know, because you know them, right? When you go on a date with someone, if they tell you something, do you remember? And hey, maybe you don't. And maybe this actual tip is for you to become a better listener. I don't know. But it's something that I know that if you end up in a long-term relationship with someone who is very self-centered, it's painful. It does not feel good not being taken in. But it's also 50% your responsibility to be taken in. So I want you to really think about if you're hiding behind listening, and then we could easily, label someone as a bad listener when you were the one who was asking so many questions that all they did was talk because they were answering your questions, So that's really something for you to think about, the way that you are when you're nervous, right? That's something. And the last one is that they're very private. And there's nothing wrong with slowly allowing things to come out in your life. But there's a difference between someone being private and someone being secretive. I had this experience years ago, and I should have known, but I didn't. I was dating someone who was a trainer at my gym, and he was a singer in a band and whatever, and I never went to his apartment in the entire year that I dated him. And in many ways, I found out by the end of that relationship that he had misrepresented himself in many ways. And it was like, I just wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. I just really wanted to be in a relationship. I was living in New York and I was lonely, and, I thought there was something like dangerous about this guy. It was kind of cool. It was kind of sexy. And in the end, I really, sort of put myself at risk, because if somebody lies about one thing, they may lie about many things that could impact your emotional health, your physical health, right? If someone is pretending to be monogamous but is not being monogamous. Yes. So I would, after that experience, I never dated another person who acted that way. I was like, if you hate your apartment so much, then move. Then get a better apartment. Like, that should have been a warning sign as well. Like, the excuse was he didn't like his apartment. It was so small. But, okay, then change that. Why are you not changing that in your life? But it was really a way for him. We did everything on my turf, but in a way, he had all of this autonomy because I didn't know where he was. Right? When he wasn't with me, basically. I knew when he was working, but there's something about that secrecy that just tells you that someone has, if they're secretive, they got something to hide, So what I'm really saying about this, that was my last warning sign for dating for this particular episode. But what we're really talking about is being mindful when you're dating, that you have the power to be mindful, to not be afraid to confront someone you barely know, to not just say no to something that doesn't work for you, right? If someone is wanting everything to be on their terms, I should have said 9. Anyway, like on their terms, like, oh, hey, let's meet up, but let's do it in Brooklyn near where I live, not in Queens where you live. That is, that's telling you about what they think about you and what they think about themselves. It should be at their convenience. Take note of that, because that gets old. That really does get old. So anyway, all right, consider that a bonus tip, okay? If you guys enjoyed this, please share this episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube, whether you're listening to it on the podcast. Share it with the people in your life if you think that it will help them. I hope that you guys will stay tuned, so I will see you on our Wednesday Wisdom starting in December 2018. And ladies, if you haven't, please join the Real Love Revolution Facebook group. I hope you guys have an amazing week. And as always, take care of you.